My name is Swami Karunananda. That I usually don't refer to because that life no longer exists. I was reborn when I took sannyas in 1975. I serve in several capacities. I teach. Mainly I teach at this stage in my life the Raja Yoga, meditation, pranayama, personal transformation, and similar type topics. I do teacher trainings, workshops, retreats, speak to the people in our resident programs. So I do teaching. I offer spiritual support to people. I'm usually involved in some writing for the organization, one form or another. And I serve on various boards. I serve on our Board of Trustees. I serve as the chairperson of our Spiritual Life Board and as the chairperson of our Sannyas or Monastic Board. Seeing my master for the first time, it was something I never thought of, would never have envisioned. I graduated college. I was on a good career track. I was in a good relationship. Everything was going wonderfully in my life. But deep in my heart, there was a place that nothing, no one, no achievement could touch or fill. There was a place of a voidness, that's all I can say. And I started practicing yoga when I was in college because I went to a very competitive, very high-ranked college. And I took up yoga to maintain my ease going through that experience. And as soon as I graduated, I moved to California because that's where the New Age movement, that's where yoga was happening, especially the Bay Area in San Francisco. And I went to all the different groups, all the different yoga groups. And when I walked through the doors of the San Francisco Integral Yoga Institute, it was like my whole being exhaled and said, home. I finally found home. And shortly thereafter, the San Francisco IYI began conducting classes at my apartment in Berkeley. And then shortly thereafter, Swami Satchidananda was coming to California for the first integral yoga retreat. It was going to be 5 days in the very rustic Santa Cruz Mountains. So I went, not knowing what I was getting into, along with about 400 other people, fresh out of the hippie movement, but very excited about all that was unfolding with these fantastic teachers coming from the East. And the first time I saw Gurudev, everything within me responded. I felt in him the fullness that I was seeking. I felt embodied in him the peace, that unshakable, perfect peace that I longed for. I felt in his teachings a wisdom that my own heart resonated with. It already knew, but here it was being articulated by someone with a wisdom and an authority that were just incredible. even more so was the fact that wisdom was totally filled with love. It wasn't a harsh or aloof type of wisdom, but it was very intimate in a way. It spoke to you in the depths of your own heart. So that was 5 days in the mountains of California that changed my life forever. And I decided then and there that if I were to be so fortunate, at some time I would like to walk in his footsteps along the path he had walked. And even though I articulated that within my heart, the likelihood seemed so distant. And if it were to happen, it seemed like it would happen maybe 40 years in the future, because I knew who I was, and there was no way who I was could compute with who he was. And yet, somehow, by the miracle of his grace, 3 years later, he called people forth to come forward to take pre-sannyas. And I thought, oh my goodness, it's happening now. But I still didn't feel ready. And then there was the first pre-sannyas initiation. And it was on another retreat. And we were all at a program. And then midway through the program, Gurudev emerged from the initiation he had just given. And there were about a dozen people who had just received pre-sannyas. And their heads were shaved, and they wore white, and they wore orange scarves, like little Girl Scout or Boy Scout uniforms. And they walked out and sat down. And I kept looking from his row to their scarves, from his row to their scarves. And they looked like an emanation of him. And after doing this, it must have looked like I was at a Chinese ping pong tournament, because I was literally doing something like this. I heard something within me snap. And whatever ties were holding me back snapped and broke. And I was ready. And then I asked his permission to take pre-sannyas, and he gave his permission. Absolutely. Absolutely. They would have preferred that I follow the American dream. You know, the house in the suburbs, the 2-car garage, the children, the career. I had been preparing for a medical career, actually. They would have preferred that I pursue that. In fact, when I took sannyas in 1975, my mother was very distraught, but she wanted to find something that would put her heart at ease. So she actually traveled to the ashram in Connecticut, where the ceremony occurred, to see me, to meet Gurudev. She had never met him. And when he met her, he said to her, "You must have done a lot of prayer and penance in the past to have had a daughter that would choose this life." My mother, who never led a religious life, she was stunned to have something like that said to her. And then he said, "I will tell you what I told my own mother when she was distraught about my taking sannyas. You have one child to take care of the body, to give you grandchildren, and you have another child to take care of your soul. You're very blessed." And when my mother left, she asked for a picture of the yantra. And she went home. She was really quite artistic. And she decided to draw and then do in needlepoint a beautiful rendition of our yantra, which she sent to me. It was beautifully framed. I gave it to Gurudev, and he kept it in his house for decades. And then when my mother passed away, someone told him that she had just passed, and he sent the yantra back to me for me to have. And my father, who disapproved of this lifestyle, still was fascinated with Gurudev. And when my parents first visited the ashram in Virginia, I called Gurudev and I said, Gurudev, they're visiting. They have real concerns about what I'm doing. He said, okay, do this. Go down to Lotus now and just walk around there, and I will come join you. So it would be sort of like an informal meeting. And he came, he's so brilliant, not dressed in his robes, but in corduroy pants and a down windbreaker. And he just strolled up to us, started chatting, walked off with my father. They were chatting for quite some time, and then Gurudev left. My father came up to me and said, "Who was that man?" And I said, "Dad, that's my teacher." And he went, "Oh, that's your teacher." And whenever I spoke to him in the years that followed, one of the first things he would ask me, "How's the Swami? How's he doing? How's his health?" Shortly before I took pre-sannyas, I was living at the ashram in Northern California, Ziegler Springs, and one of the people came up to me and said, "I just got a book. It's the autobiography of Saint Teresa of Avila." And I had never heard of her before. I never really read holy books before. And when I heard her name, bells started ringing in my heart. I don't know how to describe it, but I heard bells ringing in my heart. So I thought, well, that's interesting. So I said to him, "Can I please borrow the book?" He said, "Certainly, but there's a long waiting list. About 10 people want to read it before you." And I said, "Well, okay." A couple of weeks later, I had my hair cut off to prepare me for the pre-monastic life. I've always had long hair my entire life, so it was a very big change for me. I stepped out of there feeling so different already. The moment I stepped out of the house, this fellow came by, handed me the book and said, "You're supposed to read this now." So I took the book, and from the moment I entered the pre-monastic life, she was there with me as a guide. And reading her life, which is a very interesting journey, it was as if I understood myself for the first time in my life. And she was a very interesting personality, very fiery, had a very intimate, close direction with God in the form of Jesus. And I just learned about walking a spiritual path through reading her words. And what's interesting to me now is I've set an intention of writing a book on Raja Yoga, which I feel Gurudev wishes for me to do. It's been 20 years sort of in the making, and the day I set the intention, and I said to Gurudev, I need a place to go, at least for a while, where I have no interference and I can just focus on this project. That very same day, a woman asked to meet with me at the ashram, told me of this beautiful home she had, invited me to come stay there. And when I told her of the writing project, she was thrilled. And then she told me, right down the road from her is a beautiful Carmelite chapel, which was the Order of St. Teresa of Avila. So I felt this is sort of a culmination, writing this book. And the fact that it will begin at a place with a Carmelite chapel, it's like coming full circle for me. So I felt it as a sign from God and a blessing to begin the project. The book is called Awakening, Aspiration to Realization Through Integral Yoga. In 2014, we celebrated the 100th birth anniversary of Sri Swami Satchidananda, and I wanted to make an offering in honor of that occasion. An offering I could place at my master's feet that would sort of be an expression of my gratitude for all I had received from him, and would hopefully be useful for other people in following his teachings. So over the years, I had contributed many articles to the Integral Yoga magazine. So we thought that could serve as the foundation, the beginning of a book. But I had no idea that it would come together as well as it did, as integrated as it did. And Reverend Premanjali served as project manager, and she was so helpful every step of the way in bringing the project to fruition. One of the challenges that we had was we needed a few permissions for a few of the quotes that I had used from different scriptures. One of the sources was a little reluctant to give permission, so I had to find another source to get permission for that quote. So when we finally found the source, our timeline was very, very short. And Premanjali thought we would never get permission in time for the book to be ready to be offered at the centennial celebration at the ashram. So we're literally getting down to the wire. We had only a couple of days left, and it happened to be Good Friday. So I went to Chidambaram, which is the Mahasamadhi shrine of Sri Swami Satchidananda, for noon meditation. And at the end of the meditation, I offered a prayer to Gurudev. And I said, Gurudev, I never ask you for anything, but I'm going to ask you for something today, because it's to serve you that I'm asking this. We need permission for this quote, and we need it immediately. And to be sure that this is coming through your direct intervention, today is Good Friday. And as I recall, it was at 3 p.m. that Jesus was crucified. So as a sign that you have heard this prayer and you have interceded to help make this happen, I would like to receive the permission today exactly at 3 p.m. And then I left Chidambaram, and I felt fine. I felt like it was handled. In a way, I didn't have a doubt. So I went to lunch, and then I went to work. Everything was proceeding nicely. Then around 10 after 3, I get this excited phone call from Premanjali. I said, "What is it?" She said, "You're not going to believe it. I just received the email. We got permission to use the quote." She said, "This is unheard of, to receive permission so quickly." But I wasn't impressed about receiving the permission. I asked her, what was the time index on the email? When she said 3 p.m., then I was happy. What do I think of humanity and where it's going? There's nowhere to go, really. All there is the here and now. And if we take care of the golden present, as Sri Gurudev used to say, the future will take care of itself. I think what we're seeing in the world today on many, many, many levels is polarization. And along with the polarization, political polarization, religious polarization, economic polarization, every level. Along with that, we see black and white, good and not good, in stark contrast to one another. At other times, we sort of sleepwalk through shades of gray. When things become stark, something within us responds. The spirit within is ignited. It can no longer walk blindly. It can no longer sleepwalk. This stark contrast is a powerful motivator for people to wake up. In a way, darkness calls forth the light. It's almost like we say the darkest hour is before the dawn. When it gets so dark, the human spirit says, enough, enough, enough. And people who may have been consumed with other concerns, with other issues, are called to a greater vision and a greater purpose. People who didn't think of themselves as very courageous, maybe, suddenly find the strength and power to stand up for what they feel is right. So we're in a phase now of great polarization, and you can see, such as at reunions like we're experiencing now, the European Integral Yoga reunion, people are drawn together to go deeper in their spiritual practice, to find the peace within. They're drawn together to connect with one another in joyful and meaningful ways. They're awakened to the need of stewardship for our planet, and in ways big and small are doing what they can to see that that happens. So I have great hope. I have great hope. Whenever there's to be a change, there's always a tumultuous period. So we're seeing the commotion now. But I have faith in God, and I have faith in the Sangha, and I have faith in the heart and in the faith of people of goodwill everywhere. And that will ultimately prevail. Ultimately prevail. And sometimes in history we see that it's the suffering of good people, even the suffering of Mother Earth, that slowly but surely turns the hearts of those who would do harm. And they wake up. The suffering of the good sometimes transforms the hearts of those who would do harm.